On the 8th day of NESmas, NESmaker gave to me this fussy little baby. Well, I'm going to be holding this girl most of the night, but let me tell you what this is really going to be about. How to talk to an NPC. So we rhyme both ways, whether we're talking about this cute little baby girl or we're talking about talking to an NPC. So I'm going to be pausing and starting this recording a lot today because I've got somebody who is just being crazy fussy. And I'm going to try and get out a lot of her crying. So this is what the holidays mean around here. So I apologize if these videos are coming very late in the evening. I'm doing the best that I can to make sure that I'm getting my daddy time in with this little one and being able to give you guys some tips on how to make your awesome games and get started with NESmaker. So pause that thought. I'm going to set her down and we're going to see how this goes. Okay, she is down right here next to me. She's probably going to start crying in the middle of this. Fingers crossed. So let's talk today about how to add some sort of text and NPC dialogue and stuff like that. And again, I want to be really clear that this may be different from module to module. In fact, in scrolling games, you'll have problems with this drawing routine the same way that we had problems with the HUD in a scrolling game for the exact same reasons. In a modern game, what you would see is you'd have the screen being drawn, and then when an NPC dialogue pops up, like literally over the top of that, there's a box that comes up in letters. There is no such thing as over the top on the NES. We are literally writing over background tiles and then restoring those background tiles. And that presents a whole bunch of different types of conundrums depending on the type of game that we're creating. So like if you look at this, on the screen right here, if I was to replace these background tiles in this area right here, I'd have to then restore these background tiles as well. So I've got to keep track of what tiles I'm getting rid of and what I'm restoring. And so that's one problem. But also it means if this screen has scrolled, if the camera has moved, I need to sort of keep track of the offset position. And what if I'm like straddling two screens and the boxes that I'm writing over would go on to the next screen? It gets really complicated really fast. And then there's other things like, what if I'm updating the graphics to the HUD the same time I'm updating, or a tile like you saw when I touched the present went away, right? What if I'm updating that at the same time a talk window comes up? What is it trying to restore? What if I have destructible terrain? Like what if I'm reading from the table of graphics that loads when the game loads, right? But then like I have destructible terrain, so I burn the bush isn't there anymore. I make the text box pop up, the text box goes away. How does it know to restore that with the burned bush instead of the regular bush? And there are ways to do all these things, but some of them take up a lot of ROM space, which would be totally useless in other types of games. And so a lot of times NESmaker is a lowest common denominator. This works relatively well for all purposes in a general way, not necessarily a good surgically precise instrument. So really clear to understand that goes with just about everything. All those things are possible. With this though, we're going to stick to how to do this in a static screen, because that's what this current type of text dialog box is meant for. So if you have a scrolling game and you try this and you're like scrolled halfway between screens, you might have really anomalous results, and it wouldn't work the way that you would expect it to. So just keep that in mind. We're planning this for a maze game or a single screen game. Could be a platform game that utilizes just a screen at a time. Is it possible to do text box in scrolling games? Absolutely, of course it is. But this module and these modules in this tutorial set uses a script that's meant for static screens. Should be a relatively short tutorial, hopefully. We're not going to go really hyper deep into things. What we are going to do today is we are going to go and look at our HUD and boxes, and we are going to set up a text box area. Now, I'm going to make a huge suggestion for you. When you are creating a text box area, turn on your 32 by 32 grid and make your text box area fall on that 32 by 32 grid. That's going to make sure that your attributes, your colors, conform. So basically your text is going to use the colors from the fourth grouping of sub palettes, which is how you're going to control that your text is actually white and the color of your backdrop and all that stuff. So make a box area somewhere on the screen, like I'll make mine here. And I will choose text box area. So this is where my text box area is going to be, and you can see it all, the top and the sides and the bottom all line up with this 32 by 32 pixel grid. You don't have to do that. There's other ways to sort of get around this, but again, we're dealing with limited ROM space, we're dealing with logic, so this is the easiest thing just to do that. Pause. Okay, back. All right, so that's going to be my text area. And depending on the size of this, you're going to be given a window when you go to your text node right here. You're given a window. This is the size and shape of that text box in characters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a thing called first text, and it's just going to say this is text number 1. And the important thing is not to go off outside of this, or it's going to go outside of your box. You can hit enter. Seriously, good stuff, bro. Okay, so at the end of our text action, it's not going to do anything, and don't worry about that yet. We're going to get to that. So I'll go ahead and make a second text, and I'll just say, hello world. This is text number 2. And we're going to go to, now that we've got 2 different text strings, I'm going to go to text groups. And I'm going to call this first group first screen. And in text 1, I'm going to put first text. And in text 2, I want to put second text. And you can see the text actually shows up here to remind me, okay, what's that? Now, just like adding monsters to the screen, in order to use certain text, I have to set up the text group to a screen as well. And we're going to do that in a second. And now monsters can either say this on the first screen or this on the first screen. So now that I've got that set, I'm going to go to my overworld and open up my screen. And I'm going to go to screen info. And right here, we're only really focusing on day. We haven't talked about night or triggered day or triggered night. I haven't talked about those states yet. So we only have to look at the day info. NPC day group index. I want to use my first screen group of text. She's really not happy about this. She's not happy at all how simple I'm making it for you guys. So I'm going to hit first screen, and I'm going to hit OK. And now those text strings are set up to work on this screen. Now, I don't have any NPCs, and I haven't told any controller input to activate a box or anything like that. But if I did have an NPC, if it was in slot number 1, if it was in this slot, and I had an NPC character, that NPC would say the dialogue number 1. If I had an NPC in number 2, it would give me dialogue type number 2. So in order to do this, we're going to actually make NPCs. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these snowmen NPCs instead. So I'm going to erase these guys by getting the snow tile and just erasing them. So, and I'm going to make sure that their collisions disappear too. So I've got it on null walkable, and I'm going to erase where their collisions were. I had one here and I had one here. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take this. I'm going to go to my pixel editor. And I'm going to open up that background tile set right there. And I'm going to copy my snowman by hitting Control C. And you know what? No, I'm going to make Santa my NPC. So I'm going to hit Control C here. Now I need this to be on my monster tile set, not as a background tile set. So I'm going to add a tab, and I'm going to open my monster tile set right here, which is where I had my trolls. And I'm going to paste him in, and there's Santa Claus right there. Now, obviously, this is not what he's going to look like. We already talked extensively about the BRGB stuff, right? We already talked a little bit about that stuff. So he's going to look like this if I use that color scheme, red and green and dark blue. And I think I actually have one of these set up for my object, something similar to that. So let's see if I can make him look kind of good. I'm going to go to my monster. I'm going to save that. Sorry, save that. I'm going to go to my monster graphics banks and go graphics bank 0. Go to monsters, and I'm going to make him 2x2. You know, he doesn't look all that bad just in the same sub palette as the player. So I'm going to just keep that. I think that works fine. And now I'm going to go into object details. He's not going to be animated. He's going to be standing there like, hey, what's going on here? I'm going to go to object details. And where it says animation types, not going to do anything. He's not going to have any animation. I'm going to go to details. Now this is going to be an NPC. So I'm going to click on NPC. Not going to have a speed, not going to have acceleration speed. Don't have to worry about solid or edge reactions because he's not moving around. In my actions, I don't have to worry about any of this because he's not acting. He's just going to be standing there. But I do need a bounding box. I'm going to create a bounding box. Hit close. I'm going to call this monster Santa. Save. Now I'm going to go into my monster groups. And instead of having troll, 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 and other troll, I'm going to have troll, Santa. And I'm going to hit save. Or I could make another monster group. I could click on monster group and I could make another monster group that had like all Santas or something like that. And then what I would have to do is go to my overworld and inside my day monsters, I would choose the other monster group. I can already see that in this monster group now Santa is there. So I'm going to right click right here and make my monster 1 Santa instead of the troll. So now, when I go over to Santa, he's going to be an NPC. Now, nothing's going to happen right now because I haven't told it what NPC means. Like, what do I do when there is an NPC? But let's just check this out. Make sure that this works okay. No bugs, no errors. That's good. Make sure that Santa Claus is there, and there he is. And look, he even acts as a solid unwalkable object. Now, I'm trying to hit buttons and nothing's really happening because I haven't told it what to do. So what I want to do is if I'm over there and I press the A button, it's going to bring up the dialog box. So I need to go to my input scripts and I need to add a new input script. I'm going to go to 4.5 game input scripts. Because don't forget, our maze game for this uses sort of these default scripts. And some of these are even like tests of things. Some of them are just kind of left in there from messing around a little bit. What I want to do is I want draw NPC text, which is a drawing function that I could do on a button load that is dependent on whether or not I'm tangential to an NPC object. So I'm going to use draw NPC text, double click on it. Now that's in my scripts. So now I can go to define scripts. I'm sorry, I can go to input editor. I could go to my main game state. If I press the A button, if on controller number 1, I'm going to run draw NPC text and add that script. What do you think, baby? Is that right? Is that correct? Should we check it out together? Okay, let's check it out together. What do you think? Everybody, this is Marin Jean, by the way. This is Marin Jean, my jelly bean. So, let's see if this works. And it's going to be a little bit hard to navigate on this screen with one hand, but we're going to try. What do you think? Yeah? You like these video games? Yes. Okay, here we go. So now I can move to my player, and if I hit the A button, this is text number 1. Seriously, good stuff, bro. I hit A again, and it restores my screen. So now we have the ability to tell a story. And now what we want to do is we want to expand on our story and maybe have another Santa Claus that gives us a different message or whatever. So what I could do is this is number 1. Now I can make a second Santa Claus, maybe over here. One of them is an imposter, I don't know. And the second monster is going to be Santa. So instead of my troll. So if I want to put the troll back, I'll make the third monster my troll. There we go. So now what's going to happen is if I talk to this character, it's going to give me the first message that was in my text group. If I talk to this character, that's going to give me the second message that was in my text group. So let's try that out. Oh, what? What? Am I not explaining this so you can understand? Do you feel left out of this conversation? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Someday you're going to get it. I promise. So I talk to this Santa Claus. Press the A button. This is text number 1. Good stuff, bro. I get my present. I come talk to this Santa Claus. And hello, world. This is text number 2. So you can see how we can start to tell a story. Now, I will give this disclaimer. The way that this module script is set up, if you leave a space, this is just this module. It's not the way that this works for NES or anything like that. But if you're creating a monster and you place monster 2, and like if I went to screen number 2, and I placed monster number 2 because I wanted to say what the second monster says, I wanted to say this is text number 2 instead of this is text number 1. It would still show me text number 1 in this module, and the reason is because this script it looks for object IDs, and there was no object ID number 1 that was ever created on the screen, so the one that's given object ID number 1 ends up being object number 2, so it ends up reading off of the number 1 list rather than number 2 list. Not really a problem, because what I could do, unless I'm building a huge game, what I could do is I could just go over here to text groups, and I could make a new text group, and I could make that second text the first thing in this text group, and now I can go back to my overworld, and on this screen I can put my Santa Claus here, place monster 1 Santa, but my screen info make it my next text group here instead of my first text group, instead of the one that had the text I wanted first. So now what's going to happen is it's going to show this text group right here, which means object number 1, NPC number 1 is going to tell me this. So let's just make sure that that works. So that's just a way to get around this problem. There's also just a few lines of code that you can tweak that would make it so it always recognizes the object ID for whichever one you're selecting. This is a little bit more efficient, so that's probably why I went with it when I was creating this. Text number 1, this guy's going to say text number 2, and this guy's going to say text number 2 as well. There we go. So doing good as far as NPC text. There's just a couple of things more that I want to talk about with this. You are so upset. You are so angry. Oh my goodness. It's past your bedtime. Hold on one second, guys. Okay, so next thing is just to talk a little bit about some of this stuff that you see here at the end of text action, and a couple more of these. So let's pretend that you wanted to have more than one line of text. So if you hit the A button again, it continued onward. What I could do is I can enter, and I could use this little more symbol right here, which is a shift period, and I could start typing other stuff, more text. And this is obviously going to go, if I do this enough, it will go off the screen. This is something that we're working on. I want this to be able to show you the defined edge of the text string, but you could scroll and see more. Right now, we don't have that functionality in the tool. It's on the list of things that we want to tweak, but I wasn't able to get it in for this version. So right now, it's okay if it goes off. Just know that just kind of keep in mind the size that it's supposed to be, and know that okay, if it's starting here, would that still fit in that size? So you got to use a little bit of creative imagination here. So now if I go back and I test my first text, I'll have 2 times where I've got more text sort of living underneath the text that's there. Like this. Other stuff, more text. It will go off the screen. There we go. So now that's what the more text little character does there, which is a really neat trick. The other thing I could do is I could have end of text actions. Now, don't use these, because these don't mean what you think they mean right now. Like if I put open shop, well, this game doesn't have shops. If I say win game, well, it doesn't work the same way as it always did for win game. NPC gives item, that doesn't work the way that I think it's going to work. And NPC is trigger, doesn't work. This will work, and what this will do is it will trigger the screen. And we're going to talk about triggering events and things like that in another day of NESmas. But just know that just because it says open shop, it's not actually going to open the shop. What it does is it puts a certain character at the end of the text string, like it puts the number 255 at the end of the text string. And then when the code is reading it, it says, hey, if you're at 255, do this thing. The default was for this one, open a shop, and that means something different in every single game. So there's no blanket way that we can do that. We often use gives item, because that comes up with ways that you can utilize this for all kinds of things. These are Mystic Searches references as far as items that you can unlock, but you can make these literally anything, and in a future tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So that's a common one. We don't really use open shop and win game much anymore because they just don't behave the way that they would for any other game. But we might use gives item, we might use NPC as trigger, and we'll talk about those in a subsequent tutorial. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. She is just really not having this tonight. So I hate to cut this early, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of information about how to set up text boxes in order to sort of tell a story procedurally as you go by talking to NPCs. It shows you how to create an NPC object, how to create text, how to create a text box size, how to create your actual text, type in your text, how to make text groups and assign them to a screen, and then also how to use the more button to have longer strings of text. So I hope that's enough for tonight. I would love to stay more and talk about more stuff, but little one really needs me, and she's not going to let me work any longer tonight. So I hope that was a good one for you guys, and I will see you tomorrow for the 9th day of NESmas.